Thank you, all three of you, for being here tonight for tonight's New World Order session with Samantha. So, if you guys don't know, New World Order is a monthly series organized by the Arts House that features new local literary voices, and it also discovers emerging talents in the literary art scene. It also gives voice to Singaporean writers and artists exploring new ways of approaching the written word. So tonight we have with us our moderator Mark Nair, as well as our writer Samantha. And I would like now to introduce our moderator, Mark Nair, who is an educator by day and a slam poet and artist extraordinaire by night. So Mark Nair, please. Thank you.
Hello, all of you. I can name the audience actually.
It's very intimate.
I'm supposed to start by introducing Sam. So for you, those of you who don't know, actually, we first met in 2008. We first met doing the Mr. Brown show, of which Sam and I still do. And she told me tonight, I completely forgot that the first show that we did was called The Day the Flyers Stood Still. Just when the Singapore Flyers stopped working, so that was quite interesting. It was a movie kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So we still work together writing nonsense, but tonight it's we're talking about Sam's upcoming release of reboot of Blood on the Moon, the Daywalker Chronicles. And that's volume 1, which is coming out 20th December. And volume 2, which will be out in May next year. And I think how we're going to do it today is we'll have a conversation, so to speak. And I think it would be nice if it's a conversation where you guys can jump in and just talk about things, right? So, has anyone here actually read the book before, the first version, which was released in 2010? Alright, that's fine. Not a problem.
Fresh canvas.
So it's almost as if everybody's coming into the book with a fresh pair of eyes, and maybe we can just start by, because Sam is not just writing one book, he's writing a saga. How many books do you plan to be, sir?
At first I thought it was 7, but then the story just grew, so then I wanted 9. So...
It's a 9, right?
Yeah.
So just make sure you don't do a
George R. R. Martin.
Yeah,
I will try not to die before.
I mean, he's not dead yet, but you know...
Yet.
That's a big fear. That's the thing with saga.
Yeah.
Okay, you start young and fine.
Yeah. But you die before the series then.
And your child has to finish it.
Yeah. Okay.
But why don't you just tell us what the entire chronicles are about?
Okay. So the entire chronicles are set in the city. It's kind of a mix between urban fantasy and horror. It incorporates some elements of horror, some elements from the old tradition of Gothic literature, and also the new elements of urban fantasy, like everything. I'm taking all the mythological creatures, taking the vampires, the werewolves, the fairies, and putting them in the city, the big bad city. Okay. So the Daywalker Chronicles is based on the life of Allegria Sequeira, who is a supernatural species consultant. She's the only one in the world who has this job, because it's a pretty new job, because all the vampires and werewolves just came out of the closet not too many years ago when the series starts. Yeah, so it follows her and her adventures, and if you actually take a look at the first page, at Allegria's note to the reader, where she's talking about this great cataclysmic event, and from the sound of it, it looks like the whole of humanity is pretty much in danger. That's what the whole series is leading up to. So it starts out, book 1, volume 1 starts out with a bang already, because she receives a severed finger in a box, and she discovers that it's her sister's, right? So it's just gonna get more and more, I wouldn't say dramatic, but it will lead up throughout the 9 books to that event, and everyone will finally find out what exactly is, how exactly did it get to this point where demons are roaming the streets, and it's like this total chaos, and it's altered
So it's like How I Met Your Mother, but How I Met Your Sister.
It's like How I Met the Hellmouth. Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing that when I first read the book, way back in 2010, what was interesting was that Allegria was Eurasian.
Yeah.
I assume she still is.
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't dare change.
So I don't recall ever reading any other book which has a Eurasian protagonist, especially in genre fiction.
Yeah.
You know, any thoughts on why you chose that?
Firstly, I thought it was about time. Because we're a bit of endangered species, so it would be nice to immortalize one character on pen and paper. But the other reason was that it also has something to do with her job, because like as someone of mixed ethnicity, you're much better at relating with people like of different ethnicities. You're kind of like the guy standing in the middle, you know, and that's pretty much what she does in her job. So I thought that was a nice parallel there, because she sort of smooths the relations between humans and supernaturals, which we call soups in the book, right? So I thought that was interesting parallel there to make her Eurasian of mixed ethnicity, and also, you know, so it mirrors her job, what she does.
The physical space, I'm basing a lot of this on my memory of reading the first book. Sleep City it feels very rather Gotham-like as well. You know, there's a lot of noir elements in it. It's very dark, pretty far from let's say Singapore, or there's even something in Asia.
Yeah.
So is this almost like a non-space, or are you intending a kind of a mixture of things? And will the locations change throughout the series?
Oh, okay, good question. Okay, so first I'll answer your question about what I intended for Slate City. So Slate City was meant to be this mega city, just this exaggeration of all the mega cities in the world, all the worst and the best of them. So it's this place where it has a little bit of Hollywood in it, because that's where the entertainment industry is based, but it also has a lot of vice and crime, right? So it's like any big city, but it's just hyper, it's exaggerated, you know, it's larger than life. And I found that when I was writing it, the city actually took on a life of its own and became a character in its own right in the book. So, you know, following up with your question, the second one about whether the location will change, the main location for the action in the books to come is going to be Sleep City, because that's where the event, the mystery event happens, you know, that unleashes whatever. Okay. But they will also at times travel, you know, to other locations, maybe in Southeast Asia, you know, maybe all around the world, because that's where her job takes her. Yeah, but generally, like the main thrust of the story will be located in Sleep City. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned about the city becoming a character.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a bit about the other main characters in the book?
Okay, there's Allegria Sequeira, she's the protagonist. It's told more or less through her eyes. Okay. The villain is very, very compelling. She's this vampire named Raven, who is pretty much batshit crazy. She's batshit crazy, but she's also really smart.
That means she's a bat. She's batshit crazy.
Yeah. Oh, she can't actually turn into a bat, interestingly enough.
Oh, that might explain why.
Yeah.
But it's pent up, you know.
You had to, right? Yeah, you were just waiting, right? Oh dear. Okay. So yeah, she's batshit crazy, and she wants to do very nasty things with playing with DNA of vampires and werewolves. It's going to spell a lot of trouble for humans in general. Okay, and the reason why I say she's very compelling is because she's not flat out just evil. You know, she already had that in her. She was already quite vicious even for a vampire, you know. But there was actually something that happened to her to sort of prod her along this path and really just made her snap, you know. So I just thought she was very compelling because she wasn't a clear-cut villain. And I tried to make the reader at some point feel a bit of empathy, if not sympathy, for her. But we'll just see. Y'all will have to tell me if it worked or not. Yeah. There's also Zhao, who is Prince of Sleep City. That's the title for the head of the vampire clan in any big city. And Zhao is also another very interesting character because he is not the typically vicious and brutal, head of the vampire clan that you would expect in a city like Sleep City. He is very progressive. He's got really strict rules about feeding from humans, and he's the one who pushed for a lot of better behavior from the vampires. And he's also the youngest vampire to become a prince of the city ever in history. Okay, so he's a bit like a genius in vampire society. But so in this volume, I made him not cuddly, not soft, but I made him very human on purpose. But he's also going to go through some interesting development as the series goes on, because I want the readers to also see that while he has these very progressive views and he seems very human and kind even at times, he's still pretty much a vicious killer at the end of the day, and he just makes snap decisions like that to toss people into a dungeon and have them tortured. It's nothing to him, So I'm just sort of playing with the readers and with the audience there, making them love him a bit, and other things will happen. Yeah.
So, in terms of your characters, what I gather is that they're not just stock characters. They have layers to them. They are quite rounded in the sense that they have their own goals, they have their own struggles, and so you're not just playing with the stereotype of genre fiction, right? Just I wanted to talk a bit about the whole idea of genre fiction, as opposed to literary fiction, and how generally is genre fiction received in Singapore? What do you know?
Okay, I would say it's better received than literary fiction, than new literary fiction from say emerging authors, but it still wouldn't perform as well as say, okay, when you say genre fiction, you mean just urban, fantasy, sci-fi?
Fantasy, sci-fi, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that type of genre fiction, it's still never going to perform as well as say women's literature, like chick lit and stuff like that, books like that. So that's just the unfortunate, fact of the matter. But I think there's a lot of scope for it to grow. Having said that, there's a bright side to it. So, and I've actually spoken with quite a few young writers who are really interested in producing fantasy, urban fantasy, genre fiction. And yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for it to grow. Bright side.
But do you think perhaps we, as a society, we're a bit too literal? We don't dream enough, and that maybe affects the stories and the genres we want to work in?
I think that could be part of the problem. I think that could be part of the problem. I think also it's just that in general we're just consuming less information the way we used to, even growing up, say the 80s generation, the 80s kids like you and me, right? Even us, about 50 to 70% of the information we consume is digital. It's on Facebook, it's via Twitter, it's short, it's our brains, the way our brains work is changing. So we're still used to sitting down and curling up with a book because that's what we were used to when we were younger. That's how we understood, that's how we got information. But the scary thing is I don't think that's necessarily going to continue, so I really don't know how what that spells for the future of genres of fiction, especially.
In your saga, all 9 books of it.
I know,
Why
right?
don't you read the 9th book?
Well, y'all will read it. Just get my children to write the sequels and let them deal with it.
Actually, it's an interesting question because I just happened to finish reading a Terry Brooks novel, which Race, and it's actually I read it without. After I started reading, I realized that there's all these references to events and stories and characters that obviously had earlier timelines, earlier histories, but rather than stop and go and find earlier copies, I decided just to read the story all the way through, and it was still cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
So, will the reader be able to pick up book 5 and read it, or must they start from book 1?
I think it would be a lot more pleasurable if they started from book one, but each book definitely, like say whether it's 3, 5, 9, they should be able to pick it up and understand what's going on with minimal.
So that means you have like narrative structures that kind of mini endings, conclusions, and then
Yeah. So in each book, there's a specific goal. There's a specific main plot thread that Allegria encounters, things she has to do. And in each book, there's also many events externally, some that actually affect her, that lead up to that last book, all those events in the last book in the series. So yeah, it's because I didn't want it to be a situation where people picked up the book and they're like, oh, I don't know what the hell's going on. I wanted them to be able to enjoy it and stand alone as well. Yeah.
and what?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, because you were talking a lot of things like Prince of the City and stuff like that. So, did you sort of map out this world before you decided to start writing the saga? Sort of like genealogy of each character, and what does the city look like, and what are the rules to being a vampire in this vampire world? Because Vampire Diary vampires are different from like true blood vampires and all the different kinds.
Yeah.
So, did you consciously want to make your vampires different from all these other vampires?
Okay, I did sit down and map out everything, like from the characters to how the clan hierarchy worked and a lot of information. But I didn't do that specifically saying like, oh, I'm going to be different from these people, because some of the facts are going to overlap. I mean, there's certain conventions, like most of the time they can't go on the day or they burst into flames. You can't really run away from that one. But I had a clear idea of what I didn't want, like not so much compared to other books or other stories that were already out there, but just what I didn't want, because I didn't think that was a good fit for the story. So like, for example, I am going with one of the conventions, which is that there's this big vampire council and they're very old and they're very evil and they're very terrifying, right? But I don't do that just for the sake of having the convention. Like, I did it because, okay, this is logic. Like, these vampires, they're very into protocol. They have a lot of protocol. Like, just for them to visit another prince of the city in his own territory, there's like a lot of protocol and like things have to go back and forth and 30 minutes of salutes and God, just a lot. So, those people in that kind of society would definitely have some kind of, leadership, right at the top. So that's why I wanted the council. So for each of those things that I thought about, how are the vampires going to be like in this world, even down to, are they going to drink blood from bottles? Are they going to drink it from humans? If they have a substitute, what's it going to be? Like, all of that was basically just, I wanted things to make sense, to be logical, is like, to fit how I envision the vampires would be like in the story.
Things like SOPs, did you actually like write them down?
Yeah, I did. So I was like, okay, so in each clan there are these units. There are these military units, and then they also have medical supplies and blah blah blah.
How long did that take you when you were mapping it out?
To do like all the information about the clans, how they behave, the social structures, the hierarchies, as well as the actual research about how the vampires work physically, and the character studies. It's definitely more than a month. I don't think it was more than 3 months. Yeah, but it was quite a lot. Yeah.
Wow. I have a question as well, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm Robin from the National Critics' Choice. My question for you, Samantha, is that do you see a difference between the vampires or monsters that you call in the West versus the ones in Asia? Is there a difference in terms of characteristics and beliefs?
Okay. Just on the surface level, yeah, because firstly, they're killed in different ways. If you throw rice at a Western vampire, that's not going to do anything. If you stick a pin in his neck, it's just going to make him angry, and then he will eat you. So things that work on like the Asian sort of Well, I don't really call them vampires because, like, let's say the Pontianak, right? I wouldn't consider that particular creature as a vampire per se, although they do share some of the same traits because this creature eats intestines, doesn't just drink blood, and doesn't have much of its mind and personality left. I presume. So I call them, in my book at least, I do mention them, and I call them revenants, at least Pontianaks in particular. So we do have vampires which retain their intellect. That's sort of the Western idea of the vampire that are in every country. But we also have the revenants or relatives of the vampires. I call them revenants in the book because they're a bit closer to zombies than vampires. Yeah. So there's definitely a difference, I think, but it's like different species, different subspecies. Yeah.
It's interesting because that question gets me thinking about the whole history of the Gothic and of horror. You have all the way back Dracula, and then all the Eastern mythologies, and even recently from Hollywood, right? A whole search of movies and TV series about vampires, and especially all these recent TV shows. Has it affected or influenced your writing?
Actually, I banned myself from watching other popular vampire shows or movies when I'm in the process of writing because I'm very scared that some of it will subconsciously filter in. It happens, it's not like you want it to, but it just happens. So for now, it doesn't influence me. I hope.
Yeah, because I would think that there's a lot of even like the vampires dream to go out in the daytime, things like that. It's one of their goals.
And that's one thing that you can't run away from, like this kind of overlap with other stories, other movies, whatever. Because that's a human thing. Like vampires, at least this Western idea of vampires, they retain a lot of their human urges, their human mind, and their human personality. So walking in the sunlight is the most natural thing for a person to want. So that kind of thing, I can't run away from the fact that all the vampires in True Blood also want to do that. But, I haven't really focused on that urge in particular in my book. So I try not to freak out too much about, oh no, but it's so similar and if the plot looks exactly like something else, then there's a problem. But I try not to worry too much about the similarities because to some extent they can't be helped. It's like every fantasy series has a wizard and there's a cave and a forest and a dragon. You can't help it. You can't get around it. Unless you just switch your genre. Yeah.
Why do you choose this genre actually? Were you always drawn to the horror and Gothic?
Yeah. I studied Gothic Lit. I did it for my A-levels. It was great because they were basically asking us to study books about sex and violence and vampires. You're really letting us read this? Okay. Actually, one of the books we did, Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber, it was banned in Singapore a while after we had it for our reading text because there were lots of references to S&M in it, apparently. Okay. Alright. So it was because of studying Gothic Lit and studying Dracula and Frankenstein and all the greats, the old greats, that I kind of fell in love with horror because I was very fascinated with how you could use horror and you could use monsters to talk about real things that were happening in society. Like Dracula was about men being uncomfortable with the changing role of women in society at that time. They were getting more freedoms and men were very uneasy about that. Right? Which is why a lot was made of the female vampires in Dracula, sinking their fangs into the guy, and it was all very sexual. It was basically gender discomfort, and it was also about xenophobia, when Bram Stoker describes the seething masses of London and how Dracula's the other. London was really, really crowded at that time, and of course waves and waves of people came in. So Dracula was about sex and xenophobia.
So sociological things that you trying to talk about?
I'm talking talking about, okay, in the broader scope, assimilation versus alienation. In a more focused way, xenophobia as well, because it disturbs me, and it's something that's very current, that's happening now, and I think sadly it's not going to go away for quite a long time. So I did want to address it.
Okay. Well, would you all like to hear an excerpt or two?
Yes, please. Please.
Okay, so
Give us a reading.
the two excerpts that I'm going to read for you, one is horror and one is terror. Horror is like really gross out, like giant creatures, like giant alligators chopping people's heads off. Though that's not what happens here, just an example. The alligators are like on fire. They're like, I can't, could you come closer? Just help me out. And the second one is going to be terror, which is more like the fear and all the reactions are happening in your mind. Okay, so can you just put this up? Excuse me. Okay, before I read the first extra, I'd just like to let y'all know that I'm arachnophobic, so writing this really knocked the stuffing out of me. Yeah, okay. Okay, extract 1. The dry leaves crunched under my feet. The sound seemed obscenely loud in the disturbing quiet of the forest. Of course, this was not a normal forest. This was the grey forest, rumoured to be crawling with spooks and bogies that even I hadn't heard of. If the existing folklore about the grey forest was true, I wasn't leaving it alive. No human had ever done so. The grey forest was aptly named. Everything in it seemed to be hovering between life and death. It was nothing like the kaleidoscope of vivid, bustling life that was the rainforest in Borneo. Desiccated creepers hung limply on pale brown trees that seemed too thin to support themselves. Barely any light broke through the canopy of trees, although they were not close. I didn't want to think about the reasons for this. I suspected it would be unpleasant. The ground was bare and dry. There were no tree roots to break the monotony of dark earth that lay beneath the shriveled, arid leaves on the forest floor. I squinted into the gloom ahead. Nothing but spindly trees as far as I could tell. I walked gingerly around an uneven mound of earth. Images of barrow wraiths and dead gold came to mind. Had I known what was going to emerge from that mound of earth, I would have run as if the devil himself were behind me. The flat ground seemed to shiver for a moment. I took a step forward, but quickly decided that it was a bad idea. The earth was shifting. Mounds of earth gently rose from the ground, trembling before they became inert. The absence of other living creatures grew increasingly ominous with the appearance of each new mound. They were scattered across the ground evenly and seemed to go on forever. It looked like more than 50, maybe more than 100 mounds. I lost count. Instinct took over. I yanked a vial of pure rock salt out of my bag and made a wide circle around myself, a line of white that gleamed like pale bones against the velvet darkness of the soil. If those mounds held zombies, I was safe. The mound nearest to me began to quiver violently. The earth gave way to a human head and then pale shoulders, so pale they were almost as white as the ring of salt around me. A naked torso followed. The creature smiled at me, and the teeth. They weren't fangs, not exactly. They looked like the hooked pincers that served as mouths on very large carnivorous insects. The thing spoke in a strangled, raw voice. Fresh meat, it said, and smiled with those awful, strange teeth. Its arms took on a nauseating shade of sickly pale blue. Poison, I thought immediately. Whatever that thing is, it's poisonous. The earth around the creature trembled again. I watched in mute horror as it began to change from man to... What the hell was this thing? Its arms lengthened, growing impossibly thick, while its elbows seemed to disappear. It shuddered and convulsed fitfully. Fur, thick bristly fur, sprouted from the appendages that had become its arms and legs. Earth flew as it pulled out more appendages from beneath the ground. They were thick, furred, and looked like... I counted the appendages. 8 legs. Its head swelled and became grotesquely engorged, like its torso. The teeth were the only thing that convinced my dazed brain that this was the same creature that had emerged from the mound of earth. 8 glittering eyes stared at me. The transformation was now complete. It was the same poisonous shade of blue, but the humanoid creature was now an enormous spider. I was now the first person in the world who had seen a were-spider. I just might be the last, too. I took out my dual-species handgun and waited, hearing Ryan's voice in my head. Don't think, just breathe, aim, and squeeze the trigger. The were-spider advanced toward me, clicking its jaws. The sound sent me into an irrational, blind panic. I emptied a round of shots into its swollen belly, but they couldn't penetrate its thick carapace. It reared up, clicking its jaws, which were each the length of my arm and about 5 times as wide. Through my panic, I heard another pair of jaws clicking, and another, and another. I was officially a dead woman. Okay, so that's it for the first extract. So, yay, were-spiders! Okay, I'll read out the second extract and then we can continue with the questions. Okay, so this second extract is more terror than horror. It is a few minutes to sunset at the Church of Eternal Light. The 50,000-seater amphitheater is packed to capacity, and still the fervent faithful wait at the entrance, hoping to be granted admission. There is no standing space left. They have all come for the Saturday sunset service, led by the good Reverend, the one and only Reverend White. There is an odd gleam in their eyes, and their faces are flushed. Their gazes are riveted to the screens in the waiting area that give them a two-dimensional audience with the beloved Reverend. The Reverend strides onto the stage, smiling beatifically at the waiting multitudes. There is a large white table in the center of the stage. Behind the Reverend, a red cloth unfurls to hysterical applause from the congregation. The cloth has a blazing sword embroidered on it in gold. If you allow your eyes to lose focus and let your vision grow blurred, the blazing sword looks like an upturned cross. Of course, this is just an optical illusion. There are no crosses of any sort in the Church of Eternal Light. What have you done? The Reverend booms into his clip-on mic. He is making full use of his professional theatre training and the state-of-the-art sound system in the amphitheater. The crowd waits, breathless. What have you done for the Lord today, my children, my good people? What have you done to curb the growing darkness, the pestilence of evil that threatens this great nation? The time is at hand, he screams. My brothers and sisters, the time is at hand. The glory and the honor are ours. We are a beacon of light and a pit of vipers, hope in a world that swears allegiance to Satan and his agents of darkness. The Reverend pauses, mopping his gleaming brow with a sweat-soaked handkerchief. A few of the faithful have been overcome by their fervor and have fainted. Ushers swoop in from the aisles to take them to the quiet room. Evil walks among us! The crowd loves it. They love him as they have never loved themselves, or their spouses, or their children. The time has come, my brothers and sisters, to strike fear into the hearts of the demons that walk among us. The time is here. Praise the Lord, he bellows. Spittle flies from his mouth as his ecstasy reaches new heights. The good Reverend is almost as mesmerized by the crowd as they are by him. He feels the weight of their adulation, their hopes, their fears, everything their small minds can conjure on him, and it is good. In the midst of this bacchanalian feast of adoration, the good Reverend is so paralyzed by the joy, the clarity of this moment, that he does not know what to say next to these hungry, hungry faithful. He raises his gaze to the Almighty and prays for guidance, and lo and behold, he has asked and he receives. The voice speaks to him. It tells him what to say. The voice knows, it always knows what the faithful need to hear. The good Reverend used to wonder when he first began to hear the voice if it had methods too unusual, too unorthodox for the faithful. After the church's profits hit the 10 million mark, after the new house and the considerably larger paycheck, a leader of the church had to be compensated fairly and there was Kiki's degree to pay for, the good Reverend didn't question the voice anymore. Things went well when he listened to the voice. Why wouldn't they? It was, after all, the voice of God, or at least the voice of one of his angels. The Reverend's eyes are unnaturally bright, his face contorted with bestial, fierce joy. He trembles as he speaks, but it is not timidity that makes him waver. With divine intervention from the voice, the good Reverend has the crowd shrieking, shouting, weeping in hysterical joy. They love him. They will leave the amphitheater with one clear message, and it is all thanks to the voice. The Reverend closes with a prayer and a reminder that soups are not people. Compassion, he says, is the snare of the devil when it is undeserved. The voice is pleased with him, and it tells him so. The flock arrived hungry, and they have been fed according to the wishes of the voice. It is now time for the good Reverend to attend to more serious matters. The flock may be happy, but there is still a battle to be done. It is time for him to visit the underground levels and initiate the newest recruits into the family. Okay, that's it.
Definitely see elements of modern society in that.
Yeah.
And let's know in the way of spiders, hopefully.
Oh God, no, I really hope not.
That's
Yeah.
freaky.
So to write the West Spider Scene, I had to research all the creepiest looking tarantulas in the world. Only tarantulas would do. So that was me, arachnophobic. Every single Google image hit that came up, I was like, no, it's not creepy enough. Next one, it's so bad. It's like, why am I doing this to myself? But I thought not a lot is more horrifying than a were spider the size of an SUV.
That talks to you.
Yes. It says fresh meat. Yeah. Oh, spiders are carnivores.
I know, but at that size,
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
you guys have any questions about the story? This is from volume 2, right?
This is from volume 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, I have a question. Sorry, Samantha. Which will be the scariest character that you can't sleep every day after you've written volume 2 and volume 1?
The scariest character, I can't sleep every day.
Or do you believe in these characters that they do exist, such as vampires and ghosts?
Okay, if they do exist, I wouldn't want to meet them in a dark alley. Let's put it that way. Right? Actually, it was writing the Pontianak scene in book 1 that got me very freaked out because I was writing it at 3 a.m. in the morning, and when I was writing it, I heard a scratching at my window, and I just went, oh shit, closed. I just shut my laptop lid and went into bed. I was like, I'm not going to write anymore tonight. I'm only writing when it's daylight. That's it, man. So it's not so much the characters, but the monsters sometimes. But yeah, so I learned my lesson.
I have one last question. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
What are the mistakes that you have made as a writer that you can give advice to for aspiring young writers who wants to follow your pen in writing, dark fiction?
In particular for writing dark fiction?
Well, yes.
Okay. Be really sure of what you want, I think. Which really applies to everything in life and not just writing. But, it's very important to have the story and this alternate universe very clear in your mind before you start. Because especially for this kind of genre fiction, it needs a lot of details. Even if not all of them go onto the page at the end of the day, you knowing all the details of this universe is going to influence how the story turns out. It's going to be richer. The more you know about it, the richer the story will be. It's just the nature of this kind of genre fiction. And secondly, really, really important, don't skimp on the editing, especially if this is your first. Let your work lie fallow for a while. Get another pair of eyes to look at it. Get a professional editor or a mentor to work with you. Just get someone who is capable and familiar with this kind of genre to work with you. Don't rush to put it out. Yeah.
One really last question. That is, what are the kinds of horror books you have read before you write this wonderful volume?
Okay, there's the standard stuff like Anne Rice. I've read Laurel K. Hamilton. The normal, the standard, the more popular fiction. Okay, Laurel K. Hamilton, and the other one that's True Blood is based on. I forgot her name. That one.
Yeah.
The Suki Stackhouse series.
Yes,
I forgot
yes.
the author's name because I just remember True Blood now. Of course, Anne Rice, way back in the day. I'm a big fan of Clive Barker. I really, really like what he does. King, of course, formative years. Yeah, so those are just a few of the names. Anyone?
I have two questions. So the first one is about the character of the city. So
Of the city?
yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't read the book, but I read what was available on Google Docs before.
Okay.
And yeah, so I got up to like the sort of almost climax. Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. So my question is, there are real cities in the book. So it started off in Singapore where she was, and then she received the parcel.
Yeah.
So why create a Sleep City? I mean, if you wanted to embody sort of all these different things that are going on, why not embody them in a current city? Because that might sort of be more more identifiable for people who are living in this world. So I just wanted to know why.
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought long and hard about it because this story in particular doesn't work if she's based in Singapore. Like, it
Well,
just
doesn't
wouldn't
have to be
work.
Singapore, but it could have been like she went to New York.
Yeah, I did think about other cities, like could we have it in New York? Could we have it in London? Could we have it in Tokyo? Like could we? But then I thought, no, I don't know those cities because I'm creating this whole alternate universe based on this major location. This is the star location of the whole series, and I can't base it in a city like, yeah, okay, fine, I could go to New York for 6 months and get to know the city, but it's not the same thing. So I thought instead of doing that and sort of doing a halfway job of basing the city somewhere that I don't know well, I thought, let me create something from scratch. Let me create a hyper city that's sort of hybrid of Bangkok, New York, Tokyo. There's elements of, if you read the whole book, the series, to come, you can see elements of even Singapore in Sleep City, when it comes to how materialistic everyone is and the obsession with buying stuff, basically, in Sleep City. There's elements of, like I mentioned before, Hollywood. So I thought instead of making it, placing it in the city that I don't know that well, let's make a super city, a mega city, that's mythical in that sense. Yeah, but I still make references to other places, like I mentioned the Prince of London, I mentioned, all the other countries and places that do exist. So it's clear that it's set in this world. Yeah.
Just a little from that, why not just create a completely new universe so people have no sort of reference point to think about? Instead of starting in the place that's real and then taking it to a place that's fantasy, why not entirely fantasy?
I didn't want to do that because I needed her to have some anchors in the real world. Because also the temptation, if it had been a totally fantasy world, I would have gone more down the pure fantasy route, and I wanted to keep it closer to the urban fantasy route. So her as a supernatural species consultant, also on a practical note, right? Like when I do her case files and I write about her job and the work that she does, and when it coincides with the story, I already need to do a research on whatever city or whatever place that's in, on say a building in the city, like say she goes to London for a case, like, so I thought, okay, I could just create something from scratch, but at the end of the day I would still have to create like a larger universe for her to connect with when she does her job and goes about doing her work. And it's gonna be, every time I mention some other random place she goes to, the reader's gonna go, Trinea? What's that? Instead of London. So I thought, okay, let's sort of base it half, mythical city and then half in the real world. Yeah.
So my second question is, there are a lot of new characters that you sort of created from the book. So how did you determine who was good and who was evil? Because there are sort of various forms of were animals. So then you had the werewolves and then the werepanthers who were sort of the pets of the vampires. So how did you determine that, and what made you want to make the werewolf like bad guy?
Okay, actually only the werewolves in Raven's Nest are the bad ones in this book. So in the bigger Sleep complete city parallel universe, all the were creatures, whether they're werewolves, were-rabbits, yes, they're were-rabbits, were-panthers, they're usually accountants.
Yeah, don't talk much of it.
They're very meticulous. If you observe the behavior of real rabbits, you realize that that's what they would a were-rabbit would be. Sorry, I'm digressing. So yeah, so all the were animals, like it's usually the ones with the clans are well behaved if that's the guideline that their prince of the city lays out for them. If the prince of the city is the naughtier one, then the werewolves, all the were animals and the vampires in that clan are going to be naughtier as well. So they usually take their cue from their leaders. And same thing for were animals that live in packs that don't live with the vampire clans. Once again, they take their cues from the alphas. If the alpha lays down the law and keeps them in check, then they're good. So once again, a lot of it goes back to hierarchy in their world. Yeah. So, but I mean, of course, I decided that those ravens will also have to be bad. Yeah, because she's a villain. Yeah.
I have a question. Sorry. Do you have any plans in the pipeline to create a graphic novel to describe all the creatures and werewolves and so on?
Just purely to describe, or to do a graphic novel version?
Just to do a graphic novel version.
Ah, okay. I'm
and even
open to the
games as
idea.
well.
Yeah, I'm open to the idea. I wouldn't be doing the illustrating myself, clearly.
People.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if like artists approach me and they're interested in collaborating, yeah, why not? That would be cool.
Maybe it will be the next like Channel 5 series. Let's hope they don't ruin it like Incredible Tales. Bad GI.
Oh dear me, Incredible Tales. Good times, good times.
Actually, that's an interesting idea. However, the thing about a graphic, a graphic rendition is like, for example, I guess I don't think Sandman was ever based on a book. It was just written as graphic novel. So content will have to be, changed quite drastically. It could go the other way. Like, for example, not quite to book, but Walking Dead was a graphic novel,
That's
and
true.
then it made it into a TV series. So there's that kind of expansion, the visual expansion. So I think it's interesting. I mean, basically what you're doing is creating content, creating universe.
Yeah.
And the hybridization, follow up on this point, does kind of make sense if you want to create a setting, but also familiarize the reader, viewer within the larger context of the world.
Yeah.
This is a bit of a winding up. Just to go back a little bit to the idea of process, talking a bit about how you write and the characters that you create, and essentially, Volume 1 is a reboot, right? It first came out in 2010, but Volume 1 has been rebooted, and like what new things have you added into Volume 1?
I have added in a lot of multi-textual content. So there are instant messaging transcripts, there are notes. So you see like in the scroll, the goodie scroll, there was a personal note from Allegra. That's actually one of the first few things you see in the book. Okay, so I've also added in more of her journal entries and her case files. And so there are two reasons for this. One is I've sort of stylized it in such a way that all this extra content sort of pulls in the reader and engages the reader more directly, because she's actually appealing to you to look through the story and look through the case file, see if you can find something that she missed, right? So that is the basic, simple one. But the more complicated reason is that I wanted to pull it back to the older Gothic tradition of storytelling, where you have the story unfolding from many different sources, from letters, from newspaper articles, stuff like that. So we've got a magazine interview in the second edition of book 1, we've got WhatsApp transcripts, we've got emails flying back and forth. So the story is never told only from her perspective. It's a lot broader now. Yeah.
But do you think then the use of, let's say, WhatsApp, for example, which is a very modern phenomenon, probably in 10 years' time, it wouldn't be WhatsApp anymore. So do you think then it is localizing your narrative too much, or you don't mind that?
I don't mind a little bit of extra technology in it, if that's the trade-off. Like, But I don't specifically say what's up, I just say I am. So just a little bit broader, but yeah. So yeah, I don't mind the trade-off because like how they did it, how Bram Stoker did it in Dracula was mostly through letters of Mina and Lucy to each other and Van Helsing and back and forth, blah blah blah, as well as newspaper articles. And there are only so many journal entries and newspaper articles I can create, you know. So I wanted to make it just sort of, you know, broader.
Okay.
So that's why I decided to take it like, you know, use I am transcripts.
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite, all-time favorite vampire or zombie book or and a movie adaptation or TV adaptation?
I think the all-time favorite vampire book would have to be Stoker's Dracula, because even in this day and age, like if I read it by a window at night and I read about that scene where Dracula's climbing up the wall, I'm like, yes, move away from the window now. Yeah, it still manages to chill you, you know, even though it was written so long ago, it hasn't lost any of the relevance. Like, and I just love what Stoker did with the story and how he told the story. So that's I know it's very, yeah, it's a very old example, but that is my favorite from the classics at least.
So if someone was sort of starting out, would you ask them to start with that or one of the other fluffier ones?
To start with one of the fluffier ones. Actually, I think that the TV adaptation of the Suki Stackhouse series, True Blood, did a very good job of taking the book and making it into a completely different creature.
Like over 18.
Yes, you do have to be over 18, kids.
It's like Vampire Diaries.
Yeah, Charlene Harris, that's your first name. Yeah. Y'all Googled it, didn't you? Yeah. So because in the Suki Stackhouse books, it's quite a lot fluffier than in the TV series. In the TV series, there's one scene where Eric Northman just reaches out and grabs this man's heart out of his chest and goes, right? Which amused me because it's just the way my mind works. But yeah, it's just, it doesn't pull the punches like the TV adaptation. So I really enjoy that a lot.
Is the book as highly sexual as
Sorry?
Is the book as highly sexually charged as TV?
To me, it wasn't. To me, yeah.
It's American TV.
Yeah.
Vampire Diaries is like, I have no idea, I haven't watched it. So. I've seen more takes on the WB channel.
I have a question. What scares you more, Asian demons or the other ones?
I think it would definitely be the Asian demons because they have a nasty habit of trying to eat you, which is not fun. Like, you know, poltergeist will throw stuff around the room. Okay, but, you know, the Hotiana will try and eat you. So for me, it's like, yeah, okay, between the two, I'm definitely more terrified of some of the Asian creatures. Yeah, like the Asian female vampire cousins and all the variations, not just, you know, the Hotiana. Yeah, so those terrify me a lot.
Is it also because it's closer to home?
Definitely. I mean, if I were, say, living in New York, I wouldn't worry so much about one coming to visit me, but I don't live too far from McRitchie Reservoir, you know? Like, whoa, it's a bit too close to home, man. Yeah. Literally.
Asian demons are most concerned about food.
Yeah.
Asian.
It's an Asian thing.
It's an Asian thing. So we're living on it, you know.
It's like,
You must
eat.
I don't feel like Indian tonight. I feel like Filipino.
Can we get Mexican? Wow.
Any more questions, guys? If not, I think we're about done.